Brooklyn's new bishop got off to a busy start this new year, making key stops on January 1st to mark some big milestones in the Diocese of Brooklyn. Bishop Robert Brennan began 2022 celebrating the opening mass for the first church on Long Island. That's the Cathedral Basilica of St. James in downtown Brooklyn, and it's marking its 200th birthday. The parish was the third to be erected in New York City, only predated by St. Peter's and Old St. Patrick's Cathedral in Manhattan. St. James was constructed in response to the request of lay people who desperately wanted a parish in Brooklyn. Next on Bishop Brennan's agenda was the Haitian Ministry's Independence Day Mass, marking 212 years as the first Black republic in the world. Bishop Brennan appealed for joy and peace at the end of the Mass, but said that those qualities are already present in Haitian Catholics despite the constant turmoil in their homeland. And despite the rise in coronavirus cases across the city, Bishop Brennan says the Catholic Church will continue to remain open, providing a lifeline so many desperately need. The diocese has consistently taken special precautions to protect against the spread of the variant. Some of those include mask wearing, a moratorium on the distribution of wine, and no handshakes during the sign of peace. It's also an important time for the worldwide Catholic Church. The Synod's diocesan phase is well underway in Brooklyn and Queens, with listening sessions being held at the ground level to get feedback from parishioners. Bishop Brennan joins us now to talk more about what his plans are to keep the process going despite the Omicron outbreak. But first, Bishop, you've now completed your first holidays here in Brooklyn, and unfortunately they came with this huge spike in cases. We have a lot of families here in the Diocese of Brooklyn that were affected during this special season. So what's your message to them? How do they keep the faith?
Well, I mean, it goes really to the heart of the message of Christmas that Jesus came in to live the messiness of human life. And boy, you could say today, if life gets messy, it's as messy as it could ever get these days, right? We're dealing with a lot of that and a good amount of suffering, but also even a fair amount of frustration and disappointment. So, today at Mass, we had the story of Jesus walking on the water and meeting the disciples in a storm. The boat was being tossed about, and Jesus approaches them and he says, "Take courage." I think that's his message to us. That's the message of Christmas. Come into the world. I'm with you. And I always say, Jesus never promised his disciples, and what does he promise us? A life without storms. But he does promise that he's with us always. So take courage. Take courage. Animo. I had the Mass in Spanish this morning. Animo. Take courage. It's I. Don't be afraid.
Yeah, and you can go to Mass because we are, as we've mentioned already, we're taking those precautions at churches, right?
We've been operating safe, and this is an important thing to know, that we've been heeding medical advice, operating safely, caring for the health and well-being of our parishioners for many months now, since we opened up after those early days of the pandemic. We followed the advice that was given to us in terms of sanitizing things, in terms of distancing, in terms of masks. When we got the advice that it was basically safer, that we didn't have to quite do the same level of everything, we continue to keep our churches clean. We continue to encourage people to wear masks. And now in New York State, there's the state mandate. And so people are living up to that. People recognize that need to look out for one another. And so they're very, very cooperative and very generous. So those are the main things. I continue to encourage vaccination. And we want to make sure that vaccinations are available for all people, especially for people. We've been advocating that, and not only have we been advocating it, but through our agencies, through Catholic Charities, and through our parishes, we've been hosted vaccination centers and things like that. So we've been. I think that this is before I came, but I think the Diocese of Brooklyn has been right there on the forefront. The other thing is, it's important I say this, we do encourage people, if you're ill, please don't come out. If
Right.
you're ill, the threshold has gotten a lot lower now. You used to say, if you have the sniffles, deal with it. Now, if you have the sniffles, we're finding out that the sniffles may be a lot more than the sniffles. So if you're not well, please do come stay home. And thank you to Sales Media and Net TV for providing so many opportunities to continue to be connected, even if we can't be at Mass.
Absolutely, you could still watch Mass on TV, which is a great thing. Now let's get to those Synod meetings. They're so important, not only in Brooklyn and Queens, but to the worldwide church. You mentioned that you're particularly excited about them because it's a chance to get to know our diocese. So how do we keep those meetings going despite the outbreak? You know, why do we need to keep them moving forward?
Well, yeah, the conversation does need to continue. Again, we're trying to do them in such a way that it's safe for people and good for their health. There have been particular sessions that we may have had to reschedule because of a number of people who might be ill in a particular area. But we're doing what we can to meet each other along the way. So, and it's not, by the way, this isn't done in a week kind of a job. This is going to take us several months.
All right, I want to mention your busy New Year's Day. You stopped at St. James, which has such a rich history as Brooklyn's, really Long Island's mother church. What did you learn about the cathedral that maybe you didn't know before?
Well, I had learned pretty early on coming here that I believe, if I have it right, it's the third oldest church in New York, which is pretty impressive. And I was fascinated going through the history, and I had heard the name Peter Turner before, but now I know who he is. He represented the immigrant community here in Brooklyn, and they would take the ferry over to St. Peter's on Barclay Street, and they petitioned. It would have been 200 years ago, New Year's Day. They petitioned of Bishop Connolly, who was very open to them building a church in New York and in Brooklyn rather, and basically said, we want a church, we want a pastor, we want to have the fullness of Catholic life here. And that petition of an immigrant community began a legacy of great faith here on Long Island, here in Brooklyn and Queens, but all of Long Island with the building of St. James. So we thank those people 200 years ago for beginning this work. And I just think of all of the generations that have gone through there. I've been there for diocesan events when I was a seminarian. We would come for diocesan things in Brooklyn. And so it has meaning to me as well. It has meaning to many of the priests I know from here in Brooklyn. And it still continues to be a real cornerstone place for our historical celebration of the faith here.
Yeah, it really serves as a sort of living archive for the Diocese of Brooklyn. There's all sorts of history and artifacts there. Do you think Catholics in Brooklyn and Queens should try to go to a Mass there or maybe make a pilgrimage of sorts?
I would very much like to encourage that. The idea of pilgrimage is a strong spiritual experience in our Catholic faith. Yeah, as you know, Catholic faith, it involves all the senses and it involves all of us moving. It's not a static, me and my imagination. It's so, we touch, we taste, we listen, we see, and we go. And so, St. James, by the way, is himself the patron saint of pilgrimages. That's why you have the shell, Santiago de Compostela. But I would really encourage, and we're going to do it in a formal way. We're going to invite schools and groups and parishes and individuals to make pilgrimages to St. James, to come for Mass, to come and pray. It's funny you mentioned that. I said this at Mass on New Year's Day.
Oh, that's a wonderful idea. That'll be great. Now, I also want to really quickly talk about the Haitian Independence Day Mass. The Haitian community, as you know, had a very turbulent 2021. Assassinations, kidnappings, refugees fleeing to the United States only to be halted at the border. You called all Haitians resilient at that Mass. What's the spiritual lesson there for Catholics, all Catholics?
I think it goes back to that first message from today's gospel. So from where does resilience come? Well, it comes from walking with the Lord. Yes, there's a real joy, in celebrating with the Haitian community. The music is upbeat, people are so joyful. They did something interesting, which wasn't particularly Haitian, but they took advantage of it. That, every year on New Year's Eve, the Holy Father does the Te Deum. And that's the prayer. We translate it as Holy God, we praise your name. It's a prayer of thanksgiving for the year past. And they concluded the Mass with the Te Deum. It was sung, it was actually chanted in Latin, beautifully done. And that struck me. When you can, St. Paul says, rejoice in the Lord always. I say again, rejoice. He doesn't say just rejoice when everything's good. And I was just so moved by that. Like you say, after a very turbulent year, to give praise to God for the year that's been, to recognize that, yes, even in the storms, God has been with us. Jesus walks with us. Even if he's walking on water, Jesus is walking with us. And so in recognizing the resilience of the Haitian people, it's recognizing their faith, and they can teach us that sense of faith to find our strength and our courage, that no matter what the storms are, find our strength and our courage in the Lord Jesus.
A good way to start the new year. Bishop Robert Brennan, thank you so much for being with us today.
Happy New Year and God bless you.
Hi, I'm Christine Persichetti, anchor of Currents News. If you like what you saw, please hit the like button on this video. And if you want to see more content just like it, subscribe and click on the bell for notifications. Thanks for watching, because we are putting your faith in the news.